This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
All right, Kelly, this is better than good. Okay, first of all, let me just start this off by saying I wouldn't have picked you out of the lineup to be sitting here with me in a conversation like this. Sometimes when you're in high school or in college, you have an idea of like, okay, well, that person will probably need to stop drinking at some point, even when you're younger. You were not on my crystal ball or in my crystal ball, somebody I would have predicted. What is your sobriety date? Like, when did you get sober? Give us the date first.
It was August 8th, 2020. 8/8/2020.
And so what happened? And we'll build up to it, but I'm curious now that I asked you the date, what happened that precipitated you to think, okay, it's time for a change?
And again, this is a bigger story than this, but it basically was like I was doing a lot of things that were extremely uncomfortable and very like untangling things of my past and upbringing and culture, and learning a lot all at the same time, and then trying to transfer that learning to other people. It was taking up so much space in my head, and it was like sort of elevating my vibration, for like, I don't know, lack of a better term. And I was still drinking, and it just was like not fitting in my brain at the same time anymore. And I knew it wasn't. And I knew for a long time that it wasn't working for me. And there was no there with drinkings. But
Yeah.
I didn't know where to go or what to do. It just kind of was like, well, we own bars and it's part of my family's, way that they're all happy together, or. So I just kept on sort of denying it. And there was a woman I was working with at that time who's my permanent temporary sponsor. She's amazing, Colleen. And she knows so much about recovery and groups. And she'd been in AA for like 13 years at the time when I met her. And she said it was the greatest change making organization in the world. And we were doing change making at the time. And I was just like, that's like a really bold claim. Like, I want to know what happens there. I want to go. Like, what do you do? And she's like, oh, you can go anytime you want. You just have to have the desire to not drink. And I was like, well, I have that every day. So that was really like the exact impetus to when I then clicked into Zoom, because it was 2020.
You mentioned, and I love how you touched on this. You knew for a while, right? That's a big jug for people that can't see, because I forget, like, you're not Shaq over there. That's huge. It makes you. Oh man, if you can't tell, Kelly and I are friends. And by the way, you mentioned like it was, and going over to like your shore house or like and hanging out with like your family, like it was a festive, fun environment. Like, and that's kind of what we grew up like
Yes.
around. And a lot of, and we'll get into this, but there's also like a specific part about growing up where we grew up that I think lends itself to that. I'm curious to see what you think about that. But like you mentioned, for a long time, you knew you had to stop. But you kept drinking. Like how long was that? Because I think it's interesting for people to hear that, because a lot of people think, man, I need to stop, but they don't think anybody else is thinking that. But meanwhile, a lot of people are.
Oh my, probably way too long. I mean, my drinking career was from like 14 to 41. So, and in that time frame, and again, how far back? Like, do you want me to start back, or like?
Yeah, no, you know what? Let's go back. Yeah, let's go back to that first drink. Like 14 years old, you start to drink. What happens to you? What is your feeling overall and your relationship towards alcohol at 14 years old?
It was, it's the funnest 20 minutes, right? And then I just didn't know it was 20 minutes, and I didn't know it was addictive, and I didn't know it was addictive till I was 40. But at the time, it was like, I think I ran really high. I think I do run really high energy. And so my emotions would come up and like be so overwhelming. I didn't know how to handle them or what to do with them. Like, and I'm going to get super personal here. It's going to probably get weird, but I think we kind of had a crush on each other in high school. I couldn't look at you. Like, it was too overwhelming. Like, you were too old and too fast and too experienced and too fun and too cool. And I was like such a newbie nerd. Like, I was the oldest in my family. So like I was always doing everything for the first time. And I was hanging with my best friends who they still are my best friends. And they had older brothers that you all know very well. And
Yeah.
you guys were like scary fun. And it was cool to be around you, but I was way out of my league, like way out of my league. And I went
Well,
on to
right back
Penn
out,
State,
I
which
mean, that's the feeling was mutual back then, just so you know. And I felt the same exact way that you feel, but it's that
but
that
I
is
was like,
alcoholism.
I literally couldn't
Yeah.
even, I couldn't go there. I was like, I had to like numb that out. Like I was ran so high, like it was like so loud in my head. I just couldn't function like normally, it felt like. And alcohol just like took that away. I could be fun loving and cool or, dance a lot or whatever. I mean, at least that's what I thought, but who knows what I looked like. Um, and I think I like had a external, self-awareness of like, how am I coming off all the time? All the time. I can remember having that. And that's exhausting, but that's also just like my growing up too. It was like, how do you look? How is it, how are you coming off? Are you keeping your shit together? Are you, making sure you're talking to who you're supposed to talking to, or, doing what you're supposed to be doing so that you're not a loser alcoholic or something, like I always checked every box. Like I went to Penn State, drank my face off. We were, got our doctorate in drinking, but I also made sure that like I got my grades and I got my, I was with an
You were
executive
a high
me.
achiever in high school too. Like, and
Yeah.
that's the thing. You say checking all the boxes, and this is why this is so interesting because you seem like you had it all together. Like you talk to me now. You were a few years younger than me, but like I remember you seemed super confident, right? Like you seemed like you really had everything together, and I felt like I was the one who was like an outsider, and alcohol numbed that for me. So it's like it's that terminal uniqueness, right? Like
Mhm.
this is and but like, did you know that on the outside you looked the part when you were younger?
I think I did have an awareness around that, like, because that's what I was used to. Now I had zero self-awareness internally. I would not guide myself on how I felt. I would numb out. I would just disassociate from my internal self. But externally, I could have an awareness as to how I was being perceived, I think. Um, my brother too, it must just be something in how we were brought up. And our eyes, my dad was like regionally and sometimes nationally famous 20 some years ago. So like all
It
eyes
was a
were
big
on
deal.
us. We needed to show up a certain way and not, be a jerk off or maybe our name got us in the door, but I never wanted my name to be like, oh, she just got the job because, of her dad or whatever.
Did you
So it's
feel
like I was
pressure
always
around that in like in
what's
high school? Did you feel pressure around that in high school? No.
not in high
So
school,
it was a
no.
good thing.
Well, A, because the Sixers sucked in high school really bad. And then, and I went to an all-girls school, so nobody cared. It was like
Yeah.
kind of funny. And then I went to college and sort of everything blew up here. Like I was in college, I was graduating in '01 when we were going to LA like 3 weeks later
For the
for the
finals.
finals. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So it was like the rise of the Sixers was happening while I was in college and it was novel and cool, but like, I still had to like get a degree and I was in the middle of Pennsylvania, like nobody cares.
When you
Um,
look back, by the way, at those years, do you look at them through like a lens of like, because you said you drank your face off at Penn State, and there's stuff like happening around your family and you're in your orbit, like that's like interesting, important, sexy, whatever, and you're a part of that. Do you look at that with affection in the rear view, or do you look at that like maybe you weren't present? Like, how do you view that?
no, I think we knew at the time, I was always raised with a level of gratitude and graciousness that like at the time we knew we were on a roller coaster ride that was going to end. And it was so fun while it lasted. And we enjoyed every moment. And we didn't identify with it to the point where if you didn't have it, you were lost. We just tried to like use the opportunity to help the most people and bring the most amount of our friends and family in to enjoy it. And, you know, I mean, literally, the Sixers were so bad. I think it was my freshman or sophomore year. My dad sent me up to school with 500 tickets. They were actual tickets then, and they were stacked this big in like a giant rubber band. And I was trying to give them away, and nobody wanted them.
And if I think one of the reasons too you are right sized as a person is because you know your father's star was rising and he was an important figure around Philly, but like he became a star when you were by that time you were like 17, 18. You know what I mean? So like you grew up in like pretty much a hardworking blue collar family. Like you were the most normal, humble person I knew. You know,
Oh,
like
thanks.
for real. But then like when you get to college, like did you notice your drinking start to escalate to a point where you're like, okay, now I'm on my own. You know, maybe some of the boundaries are gone, and this is maybe getting a little bit risky.
I would say, like, I always wanted to be older. I always wanted to be with the older kids, and that continued in college. So, like, my then boyfriend, freshman year, now husband of 21 years, was the bouncer at like one of the most popular bars. And like, we didn't go to bars at state college, like at Penn State, but I did because I knew the bouncers at that bar. And so I ended up, going and drinking where the kids weren't even drinking. Like I wanted to go where the next, people and the next people, more and more and more. I wanted the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And like, there's so many instances that I could go back in college and be like, oh my God, yeah, I blacked out then. I blacked out then. I remember at the time being like, oh, I was on an antibiotic or I was dehydrated or whatever. But like the truth of the matter was, it was like, I was drinking too much. We were drinking too much. Culturally, I was drinking too much. I was in a sorority. It was just what we did. It was what we did. It had to do with everything, you know? Um, and then when I graduated, I worked in PR for a while in not maybe couple years in Center City, Philadelphia. And then I ended up moving to Key West, Florida, which, if I got my doctorate in drinking in Penn State, like you're literally a professional alcoholic in Key West, because as long as you show up for work and, people, that's it. As long as you show up for work, you're not an
Yeah,
alcoholic. So
yeah,
we would stay out till, 5, 6 in the morning. I mean, and when I lived there, we were there for like 5.5 years. I was off and on either pregnant or nursing a baby. And so it would almost be like when my drinking would escalate to a point, I'd be like, I better have another baby because like that's the only time that I'm sober, but also, and I would still have a glass of wine. I would still have a drink. Like I will be honest with that.
yeah.
And, always thought everything was fine. Like in retrospect, it was stupid.
Do you
My
think
kids
sometimes
were hilarious.
it was our like because again like you mentioned like it was a culture for lack of a better word, but drinking was celebrated. It was so normal. Like for someone like yourself, like you've been all over the world, but you've lived in different parts of the country. Like it's not like that everywhere. In a sense where like I've become entrenched with other people, like my fiance specifically, and her family. Like they don't fall down drunk. Like there's alcoholism some in parts of her family because it's huge and it's almost like a numbers game. But like, I feel like everybody I knew was trying to get fucked up from the time they were a freshman all the way through life. And come to find, that is not normal. It's not healthy. It's not normal. And it's pretty insane the way, if you start drinking at 14, how it completely makes you feel and stunts your productivity, growth, mentality, whatever.
And I agree with you. Like mainline, wealthy area of suburban Philadelphia, it we didn't I didn't grow up here. I grew up in Delaware County until I was like 7, 8 years old. And then we moved to Bryn Mawr. And that was like a big deal.
Yeah.
We're moving to Bryn Mawr. And so then I went to nicer house, nicer school, the whole thing. And then I'm around, generationally wealthy people that I'm like, whoa, like this is a whole nother deal. And like my parents were not drinkers. They were like maybe 2 Miller Lights on the weekend people. And their parents were not really drinkers, but all of their grandparents were alcoholics. So it was like this weird trickle down of like adult grandchildren of alcoholics because, my dad definitely was a workaholic and an egoaholic. And, my mom was, gave her power away to him in a lot of ways. Like there was all this narcissism and dysfunction that happened amongst all of that. It just so happened that like, I was like, hey, at college, this is great. This is what we do with everything. I kind of like brought it home and was like, let's try these gimlets and let's drink this wine and let's do this. And they were like all of a sudden like, oh, okay, and they went along with whatever we thought was like the new great thing. And then I felt like happy hour was the time that like everybody was like pleasant and jovial and not like, did you do this, did you do that, or off and running or working or whatever. It was just like everybody was sort of came together and had this sort of nice, jovial time. And happy hour still exists for me, but it's just very different. I have many more happy hours than
Me too. Hey,
that.
did anybody in your family ever say to you, hey, like there is this, because my mom was always on my ass because my dad's whole family was hardcore alcoholic. They just were. It was everywhere. And my dad was functional, but several members of the family were not, kind of like what you were saying. Did you ever get a warning shot from anybody in the family like, hey, we've got this, keep an eye out?
Yes, my dad years ago was like, it's in the family. Just so you're aware kind of thing. And I was like, okay. And I remember thinking, or at least finding out the definition of what I heard was an alcoholic at the time was it having a negative effect on your surroundings. So alcohol isn't like when you ingest alcohol, you have a negative effect on your surroundings. And so for a while I rode that um as my truth, but really like it was wreaking havoc inside of me. That wasn't part of my definition though. So in a way, like I didn't even tell anyone that I went to AA on Zoom or anything for like a couple weeks, and I just not drank because I went through periods of not drinking all the time.
What about Jeff, your husband? Like, was he like, it, did he ever, and you can say as much as you want to share, but did he
Yeah.
ever say like, hey, Kel, you're drinking too much? Or was he
No.
ever like,
No.
never?
That's what I
Yeah.
mean. So like when I said I went to AA, people were like, what the fuck? Like I was like the canary in the coal mine. They're like, well, shit, if you're going, like, what am I?
Yeah.
And it's like, listen, don't even, you do I just needed to do this,
Yeah.
like I tried by myself a million times. It was miserable. I hated it. Zoomed on here and everybody was like, as if I came back to a reunion of my favorite people ever. And I was just like, I get it. This is the coolest thing. Like, I totally get it. And
How long were your longest periods of not drinking, if you
like
remember?
Lent,
I mean, 9 months. But
40 days, whole 30 days, a week, dry January, all
yeah,
that
yeah,
shit.
yeah. Okay, your typical
But
stuff.
never
So when,
like an extended period of time, except pregnant. Like,
yeah. So when
8 months.
2020 hits, there's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot going on inside all of us, and the uptick in alcoholism or usage consumption definitely was there. Were you carrying around before you got to that first Zoom meeting? And it's pretty cool. Like somebody you knew, right, was like there for you in the connector. It's really cool how we're just walking around out there, like able to help people when they want it, and if we can do that, that's like the best thing we can ever do. At least for me, it's how it feels. But like, did you have any shame leading up to that first Zoom meeting? Like, were you like beating yourself
Shame.
up? Yeah.
I was fueled by shame for 40 years. I
Yeah.
can't tell you how much that is the feeling. I would get shame feels all the time for anything. I mean, and I had to do a lot of work around that. Like even after I went to AA, I was like still having shamey feelings. I'm like, this is weird because I just thought it was alcohol that I was feeling shamey about. And that's like a whole nother discussion we could go into, but I did a lot of like personal work around that to like, now I don't have like any feelings of shame, like really, but there was deep, deep, deep work that I had to do around
What was
that.
the number one thing you had shame around?
Oh, everything. No, everything. It was my go-to emotion.
Yeah.
I was fueled by it all the time. All the time. And so my brother and I, if you met us, like we would be the shameless people because we would tell you the things that you didn't think anybody would say out loud. Like
Yeah.
we would just try to be as shameless as possible because we carried so much shame. Like we would just have to like rip the Band-Aid off all the time with whoever we were with. You
Yeah,
know?
you were a spitfire. That was part of like your
Which
great
was part of our
personality and
comedy.
aura.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
your trauma is like what makes you funny, Like,
Yeah, yeah. So you had the shame. Was there
so much.
any moment that attributed to the shame, like anything, like before you got into that, like that situation where you said, you know what, I'm getting on this meeting.
Shame around drinking. Do you mean specifically around drinking or
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
in general?
Drinking,
Like,
drinking, or if
I
there's a
just,
yeah
I
something.
just, it was such an, like, it's hard for me to pinpoint because it was such a ubiquitous feeling to me all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
it literally traces back to from 0 to 2. My great grandfather raised me, like, and he had so much shame. Like, horrible things happened to him in an orphanage. I think he was very, very, very protective of me because of the horrible things that happened to him as a kid. And I think a lot of his shame transferred to me. Like, that's like the kind of deep kind of work that I had done.
No
So,
shit.
like, it was like later in life that I'm just like, this doesn't even belong to me. Like, why am I, and I was drinking it away and I was, doing all the things to like not have shame around myself.
Yeah.
Whatever you do be the best at whatever you're doing, and be the nicest and the kindest and the help, blah, 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 everything, so that I, wouldn't have shame. And of course, raised Catholic, I mean, that
Oh man, it's
contributes.
built in. I mean, look, God bless the religion. I got like whatever, but it is like I talk to guys. There's a guy who we both grew up with who doesn't drink right now, and I'm not even like he struggles with his identity as a drinker, and I am like I just see the Catholic shame like installed that's been installed, and
Mhm.
sometimes I think people that we grew up around that were Catholic, and again, this is not an overwhelming knock on the religion, but or maybe it is. But I see them really hard on themselves, and
Mhm.
a lot of that is unnecessary crap you walk around with, which is actually the stuff that stays in the way of the sunlight of the spirit that's supposed to come through you and transfer and help other people, which
Yeah,
I
it's
find
actually,
fascinating.
in retrospect, really selfish energy to me that I was spending so much time in this shame spiral instead of like, giving back to the world or something.
Yeah.
So I did have to like clear that. And I did want to mention though, because even though Colleen was the one that like got me to click in, Pete F has lived rent free in my head for almost 30 years
Yeah.
because, when I was probably a freshman or whatever with, his sister at school is when he went into the program at 17. And I was like, you can do that? Like, whoa.
Yeah.
And then just watching him my whole life and loving him and being so in awe of him that I was just like, for a while, my own shame kept me in like I'm not good enough to be like him, or I'm not bad enough, so I can't be there with those people or something. And it's like, that's not true at all.
Yeah,
I don't
no,
think
it's not
like
true, but
that. Like,
he had gotten sober and became this is a friend of mine and Kelly's, a guy who I ran the streets with, did a lot of drugs with, and drank a lot. He hit a wall at 17 and got help and became such an impressive guy. And for me, Kelly, he enabled me to know because I love comeback stories, whether it was related to sports or, um, that's why I started this show because I was sitting on a couch not being able to stop drinking. And I would turn on a documentary about the baseball player Dennis Eckersley, and he was talking about how he got sober and how it was AA. And I remember being like, shit, dude, like there is a way. And Pete was one of those hopeful people. You know what I
mhm.
mean? He was
Yeah.
literally like a purveyor of hope. And I was like, maybe I had that in my back pocket. Like, and luckily I didn't die, but I was like, I hopefully I can be like him someday and
Yep.
just flush it all. So when you stop the drinking and you go to that first Zoom meeting, what starts to happen? What kind of freedom do you find? Like, what starts to happen to you?
I felt so much space in my brain clear up. I wasn't thinking about where I was gonna get the next drink, how I was gonna feel, so I better drink this instead or this many, or then I'll wake up and go extra hard at my work. It was just like quiet all of a sudden. And that was like so nice. That was just that piece was like, huh. Like, it's harder to me. Like, I was just seeing a friend the other day, and he hadn't drank for 7 days, but he was just like, "Oh, I'm just taking a break," kind of thing, and I haven't drank for 7 days, and he's like, "Wait, how much time do you have?" And I was like, "Oh, it was 5 years in August." He goes, "Oh my god." I go, "7 days is way harder, dude." Like, I was just like, the knowing that you're gonna go back, like, that is just, I don't ever wanna have to think about that again. I really don't. It just
I
freed
have
up so
noticed
much
that.
space.
Yes, I've noticed that in people that come in. I'm like, I try to convey that to them. Like, this is like it's a 24-hour day circus in your head, and like you I don't think we understand how much time we spend when we're in our active addiction, right? Until we stop, like thinking about this stuff, planning our day, our life, our family around it. And it's something, it's shameful to admit that, but again, it shouldn't be, but it is. We feel like it is.
Yeah, it's just wild. And then from there, it was like I really only was going to the one meeting because I'm like so I don't know regimented or something. So then that was my meeting. So I went to that meeting, every Saturday at 8:30 a.m. on Zoom. Which and I don't recommend my program to anybody else. I'm
Yeah.
just saying what I did,
Yeah.
but it worked so far. So I didn't in retrospect because I didn't know anything else. I only knew Zoom. Everyone else was like, "This is horrible. I can't wait to get into the rooms, like trying to tell me this sucks." And I'm just like, "I think it's great." Like I don't know. And so normal things didn't happen. I never got coins till like, I don't know, I think my second year or something. Maybe my first year, somebody gave me one because like in real life, but not in a meeting or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I never got the like 1 month, 3 month, whatever. And I never found somebody like early to like do the steps or even be my sponsor. I had a temporary sponsor because she was like not a fan of doing the steps with people. And so it was just like, it was weird. It was just weird. And I don't remember even how long it took till we were in person again, and it was still hybrid for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then when I started going in the rooms, then it was still weird, but just different weird. It wasn't like I was meeting women and finally finding women's meetings, but now it's so different. I feel like now I've been able to, I've gone through the steps multiple times, but found somebody that had like Wally P's book Back to Basics, which I just love so much.
Yeah.
And we went through with like a small group of women. And then from there, I just felt confident to be able to whoever wanted to like go through the steps with them. And it's just been such an amazing process, probably in the last more like 2 years. Then like the beginning was just sort of all over the place or
Yeah.
however it worked. Each year, like each January, I would kind of commit something different. So like, I don't know, the second January, I was, or like the first January, I was just like, I'm just going to this meeting or whatever. And then the second January, I was like, I'm going to go to more meetings during the week. Like it wasn't even like a 90 and 90. Nobody told me to do a 90 and 90. And I would hear people talking about it when we were back in the rooms. I'm like, I never did any of this stuff, So it was a little unconventional, but
What was changing for you? You mentioned like over those 2 years, like there were amazing changes. Like when you started to go in person and you started to experience like that real connection with people.
yeah.
Like
Oh my God. Then I'm like,
Yeah,
you
what was
never want to go
changing?
back on Zoom.
What was changing for you?
New friendships, which is like pretty cool in your 40s to make new friends that you feel like you've known your whole life, which is it's just not normal. Like people don't get to do that a lot. Um, what else? Just like deeper, better relationships, more intimacy with my kids and my husband, just because I was so comfortable in my own skin and knew everything in my life was like laid out the way I wanted it to. And that like, I just think the steps are great. I just throw them at everything. I throw them at my kids with everything. Like if they're going through something, I'm just like, hey, you're powerless over this.
It works.
And like, there's nothing you can do about this, but like God can, like, just give it over to God. And then it's like, okay, well, like, what's your part in it? Da 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 da. All right, well, maybe you can, apologize to this person or change this or do that or whatever. And then it's just like, okay. I mean, literally, like all the time. I just think it every spiritual practice you can kick the tires on it. It works.
What about I'm curious about like your relationship with like your family, your friends, in a sense that like, a lot of people like yourself like really have it going on the outside. And maybe inside they know like, God, I gotta stop this. Like, a lot of like you said about Peter F, like you and myself, right? Like I had the gift of desperation, right? Like, but people don't need to go that deep. But and a lot of times, like you're like, well, why would I need to look around? I have this, I have that. I think it takes like immense strength to make a decision like that when things on the outside look okay. You know what I mean? Because everybody that you told, I would imagine, people were like, really? You know, like how did you weather that storm? Because I think about women who are listening now who are going through that struggle, who are like, shit, nobody's saying anything about this. Like this is probably just all in my head. But really, if it's in your head every day, 24/7, that's
A lot of real
exhausting.
estate.
Yeah,
That's a lot of
yeah,
real
a
estate.
lot of real estate. Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm unfortunately, very zealous about whatever I'm into, so people know that. And I think sometimes I can be exhausting to some people where it's just like, oh, now she's into this again. Da, 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 da. Like I was vegan, I was this, paleo, I was this, I did that, blah, blah, blah. Now we're doing this, and it's just like, Kelly, I can't keep up. Like I think a lot of people in my life might feel like that sometimes. And I get that. And I'm like, hey, I'm not expecting anybody to do this. Like, that's why I was like very quiet about it almost because I am typically very loud about whatever I think is great.
yeah.
But if somebody were to ask me, then it's sort of like game on, obviously. And hopefully, I just love the principles of AA where it's just like attraction, not promotion. Like all I did my whole life was promote. All I was taught to do my whole life was promote. Like that's was my career was promoting. I mean, so it's like to not promote and just be is like very freeing. A and B, it's just like it's not up to me. It's fine. Um, if people asked and I would tell them and I would just say it was just taking up too much space in my brain and I just didn't see a way of it was like our hobby and activity and I was just like we need a better hobby like I just can't we're not good at that you can't be good at this um and that's it and then when I went to
Drinking
A,
is,
I
I
was
heard
just like and
somebody
I just
say,
love it
I
I
heard
just
somebody
love
say
doing
today,
this. What's that?
drinking is like, I heard somebody say today, like, you're so good at drinking, you have to retire early. Like, that's, like, it's like,
Went
that's
pro,
your
retired
hobby.
early. Yeah,
Yeah.
did all the
Yeah.
things. I really felt like I did all the things. I drank all the drinks, like, and I would say probably a year because I turned 40. I was 41 when I was sober. So when I got sober, so probably as I was turning 40, I was just noticing that like drinking wasn't doing it for me. Like I really wasn't getting the buzz at all. And then you kind of try to double down, and that really doesn't work. And I was just sort of looking at my life like, do I need this at this time? Is this even doing anything? Why am I doing this? I don't know. And like women's bodies do all kinds of crazy shit, like in 40s and stuff. And I was just like, maybe that's what's messing me up. And, I was just trying to get to like back to myself. And that putting a poison in my mouth every day was not going to do that. So.
When you to think about like, because you're very social, right? You know a lot of people. At least that's how I perceived you, right? You know a lot of people. You're connected to a lot of really good people. Was there pause or was there anxiety around you that first time? Because COVID's not a bad time to get sober because
No,
it
it was
really
great
was.
actually.
Yeah, you're not like worried about all those commitments and stuff.
Right.
And it was perfect for an alcoholic. I really believe that. I thrived during it. I mean, it was hard and there was stuff that was wrong, but like I felt really good about my little corner of the universe and what I was able to provide through recovery.
Mhm.
Um, but when you had to start going to those events to see people at drinking stuff, how did you manage that? Like, and what were your what was your preparation or how did your execution of like being sober in those moments look like?
I don't probably recommend this, but I didn't want anybody else to be uncomfortable, of course. So I was always like, I'll drive and, bring what like I always wanted just them to feel like everything was normal. It just that I wasn't drinking alcohol. And for the most part, people don't care, especially after the first half hour or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but I realized like as social as I was, I'm not as social.
Yeah.
I really and maybe it's just different. I think it's actually just the time chunks are just allotted differently. I mean, now like my favorite social times with some of my best friends, we sauna a couple of times a week. Like we play mahjong. You cannot drink when you play mahjong. At least not us. We suck so bad. It's so hard, and we cannot. Nobody can drink anyway. So we do all this other fun stuff, or I'll just be like, if I would reach out to someone to be like, let's go out for drinks. Instead, I'm like, do you want to walk dogs, on the trail this morning or something?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like my social life is so not 5 to 8 p.m. is part of it. And when it is 5 to 8 p.m., I'm kind of like, cool for 90 minutes. And I'm like, peace. Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing, unless people are like playing drums and tap dancing, like I'm down. Like, I'll hang all night. But for the most part, people are really freaking boring and they're not doing anything except telling the same story 100 more times, like, in a row.
How
So
have you? How have you? By the way, this is so awesome. How have you related your sobriety to your kids? Because again, they saw you so functional, and that's why you're such a great person to talk to about this. Like, because you were so functional and successful, family, professional, whatever. Internally, you're struggling, right? You're sharing that with us. But were your kids like, wait, what?
a
Like,
little
because I
bit.
imagine they're
At,
social and of the age where they're around it.
at the time, my oldest was 14 and my youngest was he turned 10 actually 2 days after I got sober. So they weren't young and they weren't old, but I do remember right before I got sober, like there's a bar in our house kind of with an ice maker. And I think I was making a drink. And I remember my 12-year-old sitting on the couch and like watching me. And I knew at that time because they would tell me like just how much they would pick up and watch us. And I was just like, this isn't what I want them seeing, thinking is normal, fantasizing or glorifying. And I was just like, no, like that's not what I want. And especially my 12-year-old at the time, he was like he is the most like empathic, I
Perceptive.
guess.
Oh, empathic. Okay.
And then once I was sober and we would have nights or, people would come over, still stay late or sleep over or whatever, that we still have those some nights or whatever. I remember my one son saying, as I was like, but I could still tuck them in. Like now, like sober, I could tuck them in and make sure everyone's going to bed and stuff. And I remember Charlie saying like, oh, well, Mom, I do remember like before you stopped drinking, like you would just let us stay up however long. And I was like, yeah, pretty much. I didn't care at that time. So like that was the only like negative or whatever that they shared, which is good. But
Yeah.
I when I did tuck them in sober, and even though they're at this point, 13 years old or whatever, my son would say to me, like, I'm just so glad that if anything happens or if I want to talk to you, like I know you're normal. Like I know that you are like like regular. Like there's nothing
The store
changing
never
you.
closes.
Yeah.
You're open 24/7 now, which is like a huge deal, which we
Yeah.
don't even understand. And especially someone with you who's got like a full family, like you want to be present, like literally when people need you,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And that
And
is
like
like,
kids like 14, 12, and 10, you're getting into driving everywhere. And then like
yeah,
14, 15, 16, before they get their license, like they want to get picked up, they want to get dropped off here, there, everywhere. They've got club sports, they've got all this stuff. And like I was so glad to just be like, I'll go get them. I'll go get them. I'll go get them. I'll go get them. It kept me right sized anyway. Like then I didn't feel like I was sitting around on a Friday night not drinking or something. I always just felt good that I knew I could get them at any time. I had never felt like that ever. Uh, Scarily so. So that in that point in their life, I'm so glad I was sober for.
when you talk about like, moving forward in life and like, because you talked about some of that, like relationships with your parents and interesting stuff and obviously emotional and heavy stuff. How did you ever like talk to your parents about some of the things you shared with us early on or me early on, like
Yes.
today? Like
Yes. Over the
that, because
course of
those are hard conversations.
Yeah, they are. And over the course of like years, or things would come up and I'd be like, that's why. That's why I didn't, like that's why I stopped. Like it would just take time. And I knew it was going to take time. I
Yeah.
knew that even my sobriety was going to take time. I didn't know, there's no guarantees for my own sobriety. So I was like, you know, seeing how this was going to work kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so my dad rarely drinks now because he has like a type of cancer. It's called Waldenstrom's, and it kind of will like live there for the rest of his life at some point. But he's in treatment that works, and he feels good, and it's all's well. So alcohol's not doing him any favors, obviously. But like we'll have a cigar together. That's like our happy hour,
Yeah.
but it's really just having mindful time together. And I think I really prioritized that when I was drinking. And I have to make sure I prioritize that not drinking too, is like just having that mindful time together, whatever that is, whether you're going for a walk or you just didn't have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or whatever. And it's like, because we really did savor that when it was alcohol on the front porch at the shore or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, we just have to remember to savor our cup of whatever together.
Your dad's, by the way, a great example for this, and for you, like, and I'm not trying to drive you crazy because I think so much of your dad, but like, he was a kind of guy, like, honestly, Kelly, I didn't know, and I wasn't around him a ton, but if I was around him, he seemed happy, and it was usually at a nighttime event. I had no idea he was a 2 beer guy. For all I knew, he was
Yeah.
like a 15 beer guy. And he
No.
had a couple guys that he hung out with who were definitely 15 beer guys.
Sure.
But, but he was, you would have thought he was this guy who was drinking, but he wasn't. He was like living life or wearing life like a loose shirt, however he chose to do it, at least how it seemed to me.
Yeah.
And it's cool to hear that, right? Like he was like, he's a great example. Like you don't need alcohol to have a good time or to be happy or wear a smile on your face,
No, and really, like, you have to understand though, Pete, that like work came first. I mean,
Yeah.
I should say workout came first and then work.
Yeah.
But like he was always going to get up no matter what and beat the shit out of himself. And he was going to work all hours. I mean, if he was at something social, it usually had to do with working some angle of something or some relationship or whatever.
Yeah.
Because really, I think he was a forced extrovert for sure. Like he has the most introverted tendencies of like anybody I know.
Well,
Or
have there been
he must
Go
have
ahead.
just spent all of his like extroverted dollars like in 20 to 50 and then he was all out.
Have you guys ever had a conversation about that? Like, hey, Dad, this is how I felt growing up. Like, I felt like you were working all the time.
No, because our conversations have been more like, thank God you were working all the time because you were an asshole when you were home. Like
Yeah.
But really, he's had such a like awakening over the last 11 years that I feel like I've had so many deathbed conversations with him, meaning like people don't have until they're on their deathbed that like
Yes.
we are so like everything's out there, like we're just spirits living in these meat suits and eventually like the
You
meat
sound
suit
like my
shrivel
brother.
up, but
Yeah.
like we're always going to be together in some way. um but yeah, he more came to us and was like, my God, I'm sorry I was such an asshole. And I'm like, shit, I never thought you would ever say that. That's pretty cool.
Talk to me about being a woman in recovery. I walk into my first meeting, and by the way, anybody that's listening, my first meeting was 2002. I didn't have a year till November of 2011. So it took me a while, like I was in my thing. But like when I walked into those meetings, I saw a lot of dudes. I didn't see a ton of women. Like, and I really appreciate women like you who sort of, you're out there, you're talking about it. Like there's no shame. Like, and do you take, not like you bear some great responsibility. And I say that because I think so much of you, but like you're out there now carrying the message as a woman. Like, how is that different and how have you embraced that?
That's a great question, Pete. I find that I only went to co-ed meetings for a long, long time before I found women's meetings. And then I was like, oh, well, this is totally different. So now I always know that I have to have both kind of thing, or I like to have both because it's just different. In men's meetings, like it's just different. Like I said, I went in when my kids were preteen and teen, whereas like I see moms with babies bringing them in and toddlers putting them in the daycare. And I'm like, girl, I give you so much credit. Like
Yeah.
I don't think I ever would. I definitely didn't. I didn't bring them to the daycare. I didn't go in when I like for moms and single moms coming in with babies and toddlers into the rooms. I'm like, you go. That is like, wow. Like I lay down for that. But women in AA are my favorite thing. Like there's just nothing better to me. I love men in AA. I love the experience of being in community together. There's a lot of learning there. I think certain different meetings are different. There's just, so many different meetings. I think that's part of the fun is like checking them out. And in every town I go to or place I visit. Um, but I don't mind being a minority if that's the case. If that's the mantle I can hold, that's no problem at all. But women's meetings are like, and then when I meet women at a co-ed meeting, I'm like, oh, you gotta get to the women's meeting. Like,
Yeah.
like this is
Absolutely.
cool and all, but
Yeah.
like, you gotta get to the women's
Yeah. I was living in North Jersey. I remember and I didn't go to co-ed meetings really. I mean, I didn't go to men's meetings because honestly, I was single. I would go to see girls, like whatever. Like, hey, there's a pretty girl. If it keeps me coming back, whatever. I was never
Whatever
like a shady
works,
guy
Pete.
or a weirdo. Yeah, So, but this one guy, what did you say? You wise ass?
I said, whatever works, Pete.
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure I got that right. So I was standing with this guy, Terrence, in North Jersey. And, we were saying the prayer, and he's like, come to the Bowery Boys, this meeting. And it was a men's meeting. And it really, really changed who I was and how I approached recovery. I had like a year or two at the time. But that was so special. But like, and you seem like somebody who goes to a lot of meetings. And for me, that is like a thread through the fabric of my life that really makes me sane and really allows me to contribute to society. When I don't get to meetings, I'm not doing great. What is that like for you now? Like, it's interesting because you mentioned, your dad would beat the shit out of himself. And then, like, do you make that a meeting a priority for you? Like early in the morning or at some point during the day? How do you balance your recovery with the rest of your life and your family?
That's a great question because I could go down the zealous rabbit hole of like, got to do 7 meetings, I got to meet my everyday meeting or I'm bad. I don't know. But really, I just have them, I put them into my phone through one of the meeting apps where it just kind of like logs it in perpetuity for that day. And so as long as I have like 4 on the books, and then if I'm like, oh, I'm feeling a little squirrely, and I'll especially if I have to like drop kids off at night and it's dark and I got to wait 2 hours until they're done. And like, what the hell am I going to do with myself? It's like, that's like the best time. I'm like, I just got to go to a meeting.
Yeah.
But I find that I'm probably the most like the people that go to the everyday early morning meeting. That's just what I find. It's just less drama. Sorry.
Yes. No, 100%. Yeah.
It's just more of a practice, like yoga, like karate, like just more of a practice where it's just like.
I'll say this. I winners go to those early morning meetings. That's been my experience because you clearly have something going. You clearly have a mission or a plan for the rest of your day. I would say, in my experience at least, and you're making sobriety a priority before all that other shit. And like I used to, when I lived with Murph, after I got sober, I was living in like, I went to rehab, halfway house, and then I lived in North Jersey for a while, started to kind of get a career going again, was back in Philly more. I lived with Murph for a while, another guy who's sober now. And I would go to that 562 meeting every morning. And it was like, I just was walking on clouds, leaving that place almost every day. Like, the morning meetings and the rhythm of that, like how much does that help you as
it's
someone
great.
in recovery?
My favorite one, I love 562, but my kids leave at 7:30 every morning. So I'm not able to get to it during the school year. And so I was going when we were sort of home before school started, and I found a sponsee there and everything. Like, it just was great to be part of an everyday meeting. And I was like, oh, and bye. Cause like they're back at school, but I'll be back.
Yeah.
My favorite everyday meeting is at the shore. It's Good Morning Ocean City, GMOC, and it is a frat party. It is hilarious. Just this mixed bag of nuts, regulars, amazing, loving men and women. And all summer long, I lived at the shore in Ocean City, and it is my favorite thing to do every day. Like, I get there, talking about prioritize that. I'm just like, later, 7:30.
How has your relationship with the shore changed? Because anybody that has a typical vacation spot that they grew up around, that's sober now, probably previously looked at that vacation spot as a place to go drink and have fun. I talk to people now who are our age who go to the shore, Avalon specifically. If we're talking, people listen to this all over. We're talking about Jersey Shore, but like, they're wowed by how much of a drinking environment it is. Now, Ocean City's a little different, like a dry town. but
Yeah.
like, how has your relationship with vacationing and the beach and all that changed without alcohol? And was there any kind of tough waters to navigate for a minute there?
I just think, and my sponsor, Colleen, was great with this. She's like, if you don't have something to do besides the addiction, you'll do the addiction. So you need to have something else to do. She'll always say, of course, of course. Like if somebody relapses or something, she's like, of course they relapse. Like if they weren't doing anything different or substituting anything differently than what they were already doing, of course that's going to happen. And so I made it a mindful sort of decision that like instead of whenever I was going on vacation or going to places that I love, like you said, and my priority would be like, oh, do we stop at Circle Liquor? Do we have people over this night? All the things I would do around my drinking. It's like instead I'm like, like that we're going down to the shore for Thanksgiving. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get to go to this meeting, this meeting, this meeting, and I get to meet up with this sponsee down there, my one friend that lives here. Go to this workout class, this yoga class. It's just a different set of priorities and places that I have so much fun and get lit up by. I mean, my favorite places, and I don't you love I'm like so hype. Sorry.
I love
When
it.
you are in a meeting and then like that person walks in, where you're like, they're an alcoholic too. This is great. And it's just like, the owner of this place and that person and this person and I just got a job with this person. I'm like, no shit, they're awesome. Like just this like secret society of amazing people that like I don't even think about drinking anymore. I really don't. I think one of my top number one things for continuing drinking was like, how could I go to Italy and not drink wine?
Yeah.
And I realized after the fact, when we went to Sicily for our 20-year anniversary 2 Junes ago, I got home and it was like 2 months later, and I was like, I went to Italy and I didn't drink, and I never thought about it. Like I had never once been like, oh, and like that is amazing to me that like that obsession didn't exist in that time. And it was like that, then something works. Like because that was my one of my number one reasons for continuing drinking. It's like, how am I gonna go to Europe and not drink? And it was like, I couldn't wait to go to Europe and do all kinds of shit, but it wasn't drinking.
A couple more questions for you because I'm looking now. Okay, the kids are coming home in a little bit. Um, as far as like your activity and being like a card carrying member of like recovery, like some people are, you don't want to be on the perimeter, right? Because you can get picked off, like your sponsor says. You know what I mean? Like, of course. Like, how do you? I guess the work you're doing with other alcoholics, like specifically sponsees, women, like what does that do for you? Because the most beautiful thing I ever heard, and I didn't believe it at the time, but I bought into it, was like this program, speaking of AA, is going to give you the same feeling that alcohol and drugs did. And I thought, no way. But then they were like, dude, think about it this way. Like, if it doesn't, like, you'll go back to drinking. Like, you know what I mean? If recovery wasn't fun, I promise I wouldn't be doing this shit. I'd be back to drinking. But it's a really great life. What do you do that gives you that feeling, like that you're still, you're getting the best parts of drinking, but you're not drinking? That's like that's really sobriety when you're working it. Like,
It
what do you do to
is.
get there?
Well, I try to pray. I definitely pray every morning and every night briefly, but I try to meditate every day, and that's not working out too well right now. But I love AA because there's
Me
always
too.
more things you can work on. So that's
Yeah.
on my list. Um, but I think it's great to have a sponsee. I like working with, it's fun. I like have kind of collected sponsees. So now I'm working with one at a time, but now I kind of have a team of five that like, I never gave rules in the beginning, nothing. I never said like, you have to text me or whatever. I just was like, if you want to do the steps, I really like this book. And if you buy this book and text me, I'll set up time to do it with you. And that's inevitably what happens. Like if they get the book on their own and they, reach out to me, I'm like, game on. And it takes
They want
about
it.
4 or 5 sessions for us with this book, but it's beautiful. So like every Monday at noon, I meet with her and it takes about, 5, 6, 7 weeks, whatever, breaks in there and stuff. But just keeps like another regular meeting. And I like love all the stuff that is excerpt from the book that I get to like reinvigorate in my own practice. That's like so rewarding. And then the women, like I have like a team. They don't know each other, but like they text me every morning. Like, hey, good morning. Hey, what's up? Da-da-da. Funny memes. Hey, I thought I was gonna be like miserable about this, but it went great. Da-da-da-da-da. Like just I'm just like, this is so cool. Like I guess I thought being a sponsor was gonna be like somebody calling you incessantly and complaining or something like that.
Yeah.
And like they'll call respectfully and we will have long talks about very difficult shit. And it's not a burden. It's like, oh, okay, let's come together on this because like you, me, and God can do something better than just you ruminating in your own mind, you know? And inevitably, like they feel better, I feel better. Like you're right. It's like it gives you everything you wanted from drinking and camaraderie, but without the downsides. I mean,
Yeah.
how much time do we spend feeling like shit?
So you're not like a hard ass sponsor?
No. I mean, you would
See,
think
I
I
got the
would
wrong.
be.
See, Murph would always tell me back in the day, like in college, when I had a crush on you, and I would like spill cereal on the counter. He would be like, "Kelly Croce's gonna eat you up and spit you out, dude. You can't be spilling Smart Start on the counter, dude."
Smart start.
So I always got the impression you were a real hard ass.
I was probably because I was so full of shame. I've had to berate myself and everybody else into whatever the hell they were, had to be doing. And my own perfectionism and control freakism and just so many levels of narcissism that I had to like, work through and still work through and whatever. But it's kind of like my dog. Like if she's not on a leash, she'll stay right by my side. It's like if I'm just like, this is yours. If you want to do it, I'm happy to do it with you. And like if you don't want to, like, it's not no, it's just not yet. Like, that's cool. And like,
How-
believe me, there's women that are like, we've got to go get her. She's got to be back here. I'm like, she is a big girl. Like,
yeah.
if she wants to come back here, she absolutely will be. And then inevitably they do, but like, not because I was a hard ass.
All right. Last thing, if you have a young person or a new person in that comes into the rooms, and they ask you, they're like, what the hell do I do? I can't stop. Like for anybody that's listening to this and they feel like they're hopeless, because I did,
Mhm.
and that was bullshit. Like what's your message to those people?
That's a great question too. I mean, don't drink and go to meetings is really great, but there's also guys that go to this Wednesday meeting at the shore and they go like this, and it's like, don't drink, go to God, you know, don't drink, go to God, and like people don't know what to do with that yet. But like, if you don't drink and you go to meetings, eventually God will find you. Um, but like, that's not my experience. Women are a little bit different, I want to say, and not to be so gendered, but AA was written for men and by men, and they admit that, and that's
Mhm.
great. And it's the amount of deep, deep work that was put into that this program is amazing, amazing. And then Al-Anon, its like sister program was made, and it's kind of was like AA was for the like overt narcissist male, and the Al-Anon was for the covert narcissist female, codependent, covert narcissist female.
Yeah.
But then you have females that come into AA and it's like, you know, even when it comes to like, don't do anything crazy in the first year of sobriety and don't, and tell, go make your amends to all these people that you fucked over and da 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 da. And it's like, that's not the way it works with women in my experience. In my experience, women have been giving and giving and giving and giving and working more jobs and taking care of more kids and making more food and being treated more like shit than anybody I've ever met, and they're drinking to numb it out and be like, I can't get away from this. Is horrible. I can't get away from it. So instead, then they're like faced with their life, and it's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want this job. I don't want this marriage. I don't. And it's like, yeah, I know. And so I find that women are often like, they need to make amends with themselves so much, and men do too. I mean, believe me, but
Yeah.
like women have so much amends to make to themselves that like there's not a lot of dramatic stories of amends that they have to make. There's some of the letters that they got to burn, and there's living amends that they make, but like it's in so many cases that in my experience and in my, white privileged woman echelon, I'm saying, so
Yeah.
that's what my experience is, and I want to name those privileges because that's important. Is that like they're finally just getting still with themselves, and there's a lot that's happening, and it's just like it's okay, like, and sometimes they do make the big decisions, and it's like okay, but okay, how do you want to do this? Like who's a professional? Who's gonna, what are the resources you need? There's everybody in AA has some job somewhere. Like they'll know somebody,
Yeah.
Oftentimes they need lawyers, they need babysitters, they need dog sitters, like I'm making soup and bringing it to my neighbor because her husband's back in rehab and, she's a 1.5-year-old to take care of. It's just like women take care of women because women are constantly taking care of people.
So what's your message to those women that come in with all this amends to make to themselves?
Is that you come first. Like when I say you, it's like you are God and therefore you come first. Like God comes first over and everything, but like God is not outside of you. Like that is you too,
Damn. All right, Kelly, that's good stuff. You're amazing, by the way. Anything else?
God, I don't even know. I don't even know, Pete. We know only a little.
Yes, we know only a little. But I know this. I am better for having this conversation with you and for reconnecting with you.
I'm so happy to see you. Thank you so much for having me on. I was very honored to be asked.
Are you kidding me? Yeah, you're a superstar.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.